and thinking to myself, do you all know who I am? And of course, I'm nobody. But I'm thinking, do you know who I am? Because I am somebody. In fact, I am actually a rock star already. Because in my heart, I was.
For decades, Stevie Nicks has cast a spell over generations with her haunting voice, poetic lyrics, and enigmatic presence. But behind the flowing scarves and mystic allure lies a love story that has remained hidden until now. A secret romance that shaped her music, fueled her greatest songs, and left an imprint on her soul. Who was the man that held her heart captive for so long? What untold emotions lie beneath the melodies we know by heart? Tonight, we uncover the passion, heartbreak, and enduring love that defined her journey. From fleeting affairs to devastating breakups, these relationships weren't just headlines. They were the lifeblood of her artistry. The pain, the longing, the dreams that turned into heartbreak. Each chapter in her love life became the soundtrack to a generation. This is the untold love story of Stevie Nicks, a woman who loved deeply, lost painfully, and turned every broken piece into music that would last forever. She was a dreamer with a voice like no other. He was a quiet, brooding guitarist with a talent that couldn't be ignored. When Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham first met in high school, neither of them knew they were about to embark on a love story that would shape the future of rock and roll. Their first encounter wasn't a dramatic whirlwind, just a simple moment. Two teenagers who shared a love for music. But something sparked between them, something unspoken yet undeniable. Their voices blended in a way that felt almost predestined, as if the universe had already written their future in harmony. After high school, they drifted apart, but fate had other plans. 2 years later, Lindsey, now playing with a psychedelic rock band called Fritz, needed a singer. He called Stevie. Without hesitation, she said yes. That single phone call changed everything. As the band took shape, so did their bond. Late-night rehearsals turned into stolen moments, songwriting sessions became love letters, and soon, their partnership extended far beyond the stage. Fritz became their training ground, a place where they learned the brutal realities of the music industry. They opened for rock legends like Jefferson Airplane and Janis Joplin, sharing stages with artists who were shaping the counterculture movement. But despite the thrill of playing for packed crowds, Fritz never broke through. The industry was ruthless, the competition fierce, and soon, the dream began to unravel. When the band fell apart in 1972, Stevie and Lindsey were left standing together, holding on to nothing but their love and a shared belief that they were meant for something greater. Determined not to give up, they packed their lives into a beat-up car and drove to Los Angeles with nothing but a few dollars and a promise to make it work. The city was unforgiving, the dream harder to reach than they imagined. Struggling to pay rent, Stevie worked as a waitress and a cleaning lady, scrubbing the homes of the very people she dreamed of being. Lindsey, ever the perfectionist, focused on their music, determined to prove that they were worth more than just another failed band. And then, after months of struggle, came their first real shot. In 1973, they released Buckingham Nicks, an album that showcased their chemistry in its purest form. His intricate guitar work, her ethereal voice, their harmonies blending like magic. But the album flopped. No radio play, no hit singles, no sudden rise to fame, just another rejection. But rejection didn't break them. It only made them hungrier. Then, in 1974, their luck changed with a single phone call. Mick Fleetwood, searching for a new guitarist for Fleetwood Mac, heard Lindsey's playing and was impressed. He offered him the spot. But Lindsey had one condition: Stevie comes too. It was a bold move, but one that would change music history. With that, they stepped into a new world, one where success and chaos would collide. Their addition to Fleetwood Mac was an instant transformation. The band, once struggling to stay relevant, suddenly had a fresh, intoxicating sound. Stevie's voice and presence, combined with Lindsey's raw talent, took them to places they had only dreamed of. And then came Rumours, the album that defined not just their careers, but their relationship, their heartbreak, and the pain of a love unraveling in front of millions. By the time they were recording Rumours, their love had already begun to fall apart. The pressure of fame, the endless touring, the creative tensions, it all chipped away at what they had built. Their fights were explosive, their passion burning into something almost unrecognizable. Yet, in the middle of all the chaos, they created music that would stand the test of time. Stevie poured her heartbreak into Dreams, a song that was both a farewell and a longing for what once was. Lindsey responded with Go Your Own Way, a bitter, fiery anthem that cut through the air like a blade. They weren't just writing songs, they were having the last word in a relationship that was falling apart in real time. The entire world watched as they sang their pain to each other, song after song, lyric after lyric. And yet, even after the romance ended, the fire between them never truly faded. The love they once had morphed into something else, a connection too deep to break, a chemistry that refused to die. They spent decades performing together, their history woven into every note, every glance across the stage, every harmony that still carried the ghost of what once was. Through breakups, reunions, and solo ventures, Stevie and Lindsey remained bound by music, by the past they could never escape, by the echoes of a love story written in chords and melodies. It was never just about the songs, it was about them, their love, their heartbreak, their passion, their war. And in the end, it wasn't about who left who. It wasn't about the fights, the betrayals, or the years lost. It was about the music they created together, a legacy that would live on long after the last note faded. Los Angeles in the 1970s was a world of smoky bars, endless jam sessions, and a music scene where legends were being made overnight. It was here, in this electric atmosphere, that Stevie Nicks crossed paths with J.D. Souther. He wasn't just another musician, he was already an established songwriter, deeply embedded in the West Coast rock movement. His name was etched in the foundations of the Eagles, co-writing some of their biggest hits. His sound was smooth, sophisticated, effortlessly cool, and for a brief moment in time, he and Stevie found themselves drawn into a whirlwind romance. Their connection was instant. They spoke the same language, the language of melodies and lyrics, of long nights spent dissecting songs and dreams. Souther was different from the men Stevie had loved before. He wasn't caught in the same cycle of chaos that Fleetwood Mac thrived on. He was steady, self-assured, a man who understood the industry without letting it consume him. He saw her not just as a rock star, but as an artist in her own right. For Stevie, it was refreshing. With Lindsey, love had been tangled in ambition and resentment. With Mick, it had been forbidden and fleeting. But with J.D., there was no war to fight, no lingering wounds to navigate. It was simple, easy, and in its own way, that made it even more dangerous. Souther introduced Stevie to a new side of the music world, one that wasn't driven by tension and heartbreak. He was a songwriter first, someone who could craft a story in 3 minutes and leave listeners aching for more. His influence on her was undeniable. He showed her how to refine her writing, how to strip a song down to its core, and let the emotion do the work. But beneath the sweetness of their romance, there was an undercurrent of something unspoken. Stevie had spent years proving that she was more than just someone's girlfriend, more than just a singer attached to a famous band. She was building something of her own, something that couldn't afford to be overshadowed by another man's success. And though JD respected her talent, she couldn't ignore the way the industry still saw women. She watched as male songwriters, producers, and musicians were given a level of credibility that women had to fight for. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to risk becoming someone's supporting act. And deep down, she knew that if she stayed, if she let herself melt into the comfort of his world, she might lose the fire that had gotten her this far. Their romance, while passionate, was never meant to last. The very thing that brought them together, their shared love for music, was the same thing that pulled them apart. Stevie was on the brink of launching her solo career, stepping out from the shadow of Fleetwood Mac to prove that she could stand on her own. And for that to happen, she couldn't be defined by another relationship. She had to be Stevie Nicks, not Stevie Nicks, J.D. Souther's girlfriend. So, she walked away. Not in anger, not in heartbreak, but in quiet understanding. She chose her independence, her music, her own path. And though their time together was short, its impact stayed with her. In the years that followed, echoes of their relationship found their way into her songs. After the glitter fades carried the wistfulness of their time together, a reflection of love that was beautiful, but ultimately unsustainable. And though she never spoke much about JD in interviews, the respect she held for him was evident in the way she talked about songwriting, about the lessons she had learned along the way. Their story wasn't one of tragedy or betrayal. It was a moment, a fleeting chapter in the long, complex novel of Stevie Nicks's life. A relationship that existed not to break her, but to remind her of who she was and who she was meant to become. And in the end, that was enough. It was the kind of mistake that could shatter a band, the kind of love that was never meant to be. Stevie Nicks and Mick Fleetwood were more than just bandmates. They were family, bonded by music, fame, and the chaotic whirlwind that was Fleetwood Mac. But in the late 1970s, in the eye of the storm, they crossed a line. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even expected. Mick was married. Stevie had just walked away from Lindsey. Their relationship had always been built on trust, respect, and a deep creative connection. But somewhere between the endless tours, the late-night recording sessions, and the emotional wreckage left behind by their past loves, something changed. What started as friendship turned into something else, a stolen moment, a secret they weren't ready to admit, even to themselves. The affair burned fast and bright, but it was never built to last. Mick was the leader of Fleetwood Mac, the glue that held the band together. Stevie was the band's biggest star, the voice that had captivated millions. Together, they had everything, except the ability to make it work. Their romance was hidden from the public, but within the band, the tension was impossible to ignore. Lindsey knew, Christine knew, John knew, and no matter how hard they tried to keep it from affecting the music, it did. The unspoken glances, the shift in energy, the quiet resentment, it all seeped into the atmosphere of Fleetwood Mac, already a band teetering on the edge of dysfunction. And then, just as quickly as it had started, it was over. Mick, struggling with his own demons, ended things. His marriage had already collapsed under the weight of it all, and his affair with Stevie only added to the wreckage. For Stevie, it was another heartbreak, another lesson in love and loss. But unlike Lindsey, Mick wasn't the kind of man she could fight for. He was brilliant, complicated, self-destructive. And deep down, she knew he would never be hers. The fallout was inevitable. The band had already survived the breakup of Stevie and Lindsey. Could it survive this? The answer, somehow, was yes. Because if Fleetwood Mac had proven anything, it was that they could endure anything. The pain, the betrayal, the mistakes. It all became part of their story, woven into the music that defined them. Stevie channeled the heartbreak into her songs, letting the pain bleed into the melodies. Sarah, one of her most haunting, deeply personal tracks, was a love letter to what could have been, a whisper of a life that slipped through her fingers. The lyrics carried a quiet sadness, a longing for something that was never real enough to hold on to. And Mick? He buried himself in the music, in the madness of being the man who kept the machine running. His relationship with Stevie became another piece of history, another chapter in the tangled web of love and heartbreak that was Fleetwood Mac. Looking back, Stevie has called the affair a mistake, one that hurt people, one that she regrets, but she's never denied the truth of it. The connection between them was real, even if it was fleeting. And like everything in her life, she turned it into art, into something that would last forever. Because, in the world of Fleetwood Mac, nothing was ever simple. Love and music, pain and passion, they were always tangled together, inseparable. And for Stevie Nicks, that was both the greatest gift and the deepest curse. The moment Stevie Nicks and Don Henley met, the chemistry was undeniable. She was the reigning queen of rock and roll, the bewitching voice behind Fleetwood Mac. He was the mastermind behind the Eagles, a songwriter with a voice as smooth as the California sun. They weren't just rock stars, they were icons. And when two forces like that collide, the impact is unforgettable. Their connection was electric, built on late-night conversations, shared stories of the road, and a mutual understanding of what it meant to live under the weight of fame. They weren't just two musicians falling into a romance. They were survivors, navigating the highs and lows of a world that demanded everything from them. For a while, it was easy. The music, the laughter, the feeling of being with someone who understood the life they both lived. But love in their world was never just about love. There were schedules, tours, egos, and expectations. And then came the moment that changed everything. Stevie was pregnant. The news hit like a tidal wave, crashing into a relationship that had never been built for stability. They were both at the peak of their careers, their lives ruled by recording sessions, sold-out shows, and the relentless pressure to be legends. There was no room for a baby in the whirlwind. It wasn't an easy choice. Stevie had spent her life fighting for her independence, for her music, for the freedom to live on her own terms. Motherhood was something she had always dreamed of, but not like this. Not with a man who wasn't ready. Not when the world was pulling her in a million different directions. And so, she made the hardest decision of her life. She ended the pregnancy. It was a choice that would haunt her for years, a wound that never fully healed. It wasn't just the loss of a child. It was the loss of a life that might have been, a version of herself she would never get to know. Don Henley never forgot either. He later revealed that, had the baby been born, they would have named her Sarah. The weight of that name followed Stevie into her music, into the aching lyrics of a song that became one of her most personal confessions. Sarah wasn't just a melody, it was a memory, a ghost of something that had once felt real. After that, things were never the same. The romance that had burned so brightly started to fade, not with an explosion, but with a quiet unraveling. The pressures of fame, the unspoken grief between them, the realization that they were never meant to build a life together. It all led to the inevitable end. But the echoes of their love never fully disappeared. Stevie has said that Don Henley was one of the great loves of her life, a man who understood her in ways few others did. Their relationship left a mark, shaping her view on love, on loss, on the sacrifices that come with being a woman in rock and roll. For Stevie, love was never simple. It was passion and pain, beauty and regret, all woven into the songs that would outlive them both. And though she walked away from Don Henley, from the life they might have had, she carried the memory with her. In every note, in every lyric, in every whispered line of a song that still haunts the world today. When Stevie Nicks walked into the studio to record Belladonna, she wasn't just making an album, she was making history. And standing beside her, shaping the sound that would define her solo career, was Jimmy Iovine. He wasn't just another producer, he was a visionary, a force of nature in the music industry. And before either of them knew it, their collaboration became something much more than music. Jimmy saw something in Stevie that few others did. He understood her, not just as a singer, not just as the frontwoman of Fleetwood Mac, but as a solo artist with a voice unlike any other. He knew how to push her, how to bring out the raw emotion in her songs, how to make sure the world saw her the way he did. And in the long hours of recording, in the late nights spent chasing perfection, something shifted between them. The boundaries between producer and artist blurred, and suddenly, they weren't just making an album. They were falling into something deeper. Their relationship was intense, passionate, built on mutual respect and a shared obsession with music. But it was also complicated. Stevie wasn't used to being produced. She was used to fighting for creative control, used to making music on her own terms. Jimmy, on the other hand, was a perfectionist, someone who thrived on control, on shaping artists into stars. And as much as they loved each other, that dynamic was always looming between them. Belladonna became their love story. Every song, every note, every lyric infused with the energy of their relationship. But as the album took off, so did the cracks in what they had built. Jimmy was demanding, focused on making Stevie the biggest solo artist in the world. But Stevie wasn't just his artist, she was his girlfriend. And the lines between their personal and professional lives started to blur in ways neither of them could control. The pressure of their success, the demands of the industry, and their own clashing personalities began to pull them apart. Jimmy was used to being in charge, but Stevie refused to be controlled. She had spent her entire career proving that she was more than just someone's girlfriend, more than just a woman attached to a man in power. And no matter how much they cared for each other, she knew she couldn't lose herself in him. The breakup was inevitable. It wasn't explosive, it wasn't dramatic. It was a slow unraveling of something that had been doomed from the start. Jimmy was devastated. He had lost not just a girlfriend, but an artist he believed in, a woman he had poured his heart and soul into. And Stevie? She walked away with an album that would become legendary, an album that proved she could stand on her own. Even after their relationship ended, their music endured. The songs they created together, Edge of 17, Stop Dragging My Heart Around, became timeless, testaments to the magic they had made, even if their love hadn't survived. Jimmy would go on to become one of the most powerful figures in the industry, shaping the careers of countless artists. Stevie would continue her reign as the queen of rock and roll, her solo career cemented in history. And though their love story was brief, its impact was undeniable. Because sometimes the most powerful relationships aren't the ones that last forever. They're the ones that leave a mark, woven into the music that never fades. Stevie Nicks had always believed in fate, in the idea that some things in life were meant to be. But in 1983, grief clouded her judgment, and she made a decision that shocked even herself. She married Kim Anderson, the widower of her best friend, Robin. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about romance. It was about loss, about holding on to something, anything, that could keep Robin's memory alive. Robin was more than just a friend. She was Stevie's soul sister, the one person who had been by her side through every storm. When Robin was diagnosed with leukemia, Stevie was devastated. And when Robin passed away, just days after giving birth to her son, Matthew, the pain was unbearable. Stevie wasn't just mourning her friend. She was mourning the future they had imagined, the years of laughter and memories that would never come. In the middle of her grief, she convinced herself that marrying Kim was the right thing to do. She told herself she was stepping in, taking care of Matthew the way Robin would have wanted. But deep down, she knew it wasn't love. It was desperation. It was a way to escape the loneliness, to quiet the voice in her head that told her she had lost something she could never replace. The marriage lasted only a few months before reality set in. Stevie wasn't meant to be a wife, not like this. She wasn't meant to raise a child in a home built on sorrow. The weight of it all was crushing, suffocating. She looked at Kim, at Matthew, and she knew this wasn't right. Robin was gone, and no amount of trying could bring her back. The divorce was inevitable. It wasn't filled with anger or betrayal, just the understanding that they had both made a mistake. Stevie walked away heartbroken, not just for herself, but for Kim, for Matthew, for Robin's memory. She had tried to do the right thing, but in the end, love wasn't something that could be forced. The aftermath was brutal. Stevie spiraled, losing herself in drugs, in exhaustion, in the never-ending grief that she had tried so hard to outrun. The pain of losing Robin, the guilt of making a choice she didn't understand. It all weighed on her like an anchor. She poured that pain into her music, into the aching melodies of Nightbird, into lyrics that spoke of ghosts and love lost too soon. Looking back, Stevie calls it the biggest mistake of her life. But from that mistake, she learned a lesson that would stay with her forever. Grief cannot be rushed. Healing cannot be forced. And love, real love, cannot be built on loss. She carried Robin's memory with her, not in marriage, but in music, in every song, in every whispered lyric, in every moment where she stood on stage and let the world hear her heart. Because that was what Robin would have wanted. Not a marriage built on sorrow, but a life filled with music, with love, with the kind of magic that never truly fades. Stevie Nicks had known love in many forms, passionate, destructive, fleeting, but with Joe Walsh, it was something different. It wasn't just romance, it wasn't just chemistry, it was something deeper, something unspoken. He was the one she called her great love, her soulmate, the man who understood her in ways no one else ever had. They met in the early 1980s, two rock and roll legends living at full speed, both carrying the weight of success and the demons that came with it. Joe Walsh was already a guitar god, a key figure in the Eagles, a man whose talent was matched only by his wild spirit. Stevie was at the height of her solo career, balancing the chaos of fame with the chaos of her personal life. And in the middle of all of it, they found each other. Their love wasn't flashy or dramatic like her past relationships. It was real, quiet, in a way that made it feel sacred. They laughed together. They understood each other's pain without needing to explain it. They were equals, not just in music, but in life. When they were together, it wasn't about the industry, the expectations, the constant pressure to be legends. It was just them. And for the first time, Stevie felt like she had found something that could last. But love, even the deepest kind, isn't always enough. They were both battling their own demons: addiction, exhaustion, the toll of years spent chasing success. The rock and roll lifestyle that had given them everything was also destroying them. Nights blurred into mornings, highs were followed by crashes, and somewhere along the way, they started losing pieces of themselves. Stevie wanted to save Joe. Joe wanted to save Stevie. But neither of them could. And that was the hardest truth of all. She could see the road they were headed down, and she knew how it would end. One of them would lose the other, not because of love, but because of the darkness that threatened to consume them both. And so, with a heart heavier than it had ever been, Stevie made the decision to walk away. It wasn't because she stopped loving him. It was because she loved him too much. She knew that if they stayed together, they would destroy each other. And Joe, in his own way, knew it too. Their breakup wasn't filled with anger or blame. It was just heartbreak, pure and simple. The kind that never fully heals. Years passed, but the regret never left her. Losing Joe Walsh left a void in her heart, one she never truly filled. She carried the pain with her, poured it into her music, turned it into songs that whispered of love, lost too soon. Has anyone ever written anything for you was more than just a ballad? It was her love letter to Joe, a song born from the longing that never went away. Looking back, she has called him the love of her life, the one who could have been forever, the one she never stopped thinking about. But life had other plans, and sometimes even the greatest love isn't enough to fight fate. In the end, Stevie Nicks had many loves. Some burned brightly and ended in flames. Some left scars that never faded. But with Joe Walsh, it was different. He was the one she walked away from, the one she never stopped missing, the one she would have given everything to keep. If only the world had been kinder to them both. And maybe that's the tragedy of love. Sometimes, even when two people are meant for each other, the timing isn't. And all that's left is the memory, the music, and the echoes of what might have been.